This is another really great example of how if we think about the limited list of rules on our SAT grammar list, we are going to have a better chance of getting a question like this right. So the first thing I would notice is we've got some tricky punctuation marks here. We have a colon in choice A. We have a semicolon in two different places in choices C and D. Now, if we're just thinking about the word however and how we would tend to punctuate it ourselves, writing in our essays, most people are going to pick the trap answer here of choice D. Okay, now I am warning you that it's not right, but I'm going to prove why it's not right. It's not always a trap. It could be right, but it is the most common way we use the word however. It has a semicolon to start and then the word and then a comma. But it's not the only way. However, it's very flexible. In fact, all of these ways are possible depending on the circumstances. But I would still be drawn to choices C and D first because remember the semicolon has a very clear rule. We need to have a sentence before and a sentence after. So let's see what we have. I don't even know. But let's think about just here's our sentence. Only 5 of these dances are included in international ballroom dance competitions. Period. Right? That's a sentence. Right? I could just end that right there. So that part checks off. Or then looking at the rest of it, right? So I'm going to ignore the word however, because however is not really going to be part of the sentence. It's always going to be kind of an add-on. That's why I didn't read it before. So we're going to just go into rumba, samba, cha-cha-cha, paso doble, and jive. Well, that's certainly not a sentence, but what's going on here? There's a dash. The last of which is grouped with the other Latin dances, despite not having Latin roots. Well, that's not a sentence either. Plus, that dash is basically another add-on. So this is really weird, right? Because we have a sentence that's ending, and then we have a clause attached to it, and then we have another clause attached to that with a dash. That's very, very weird, but I guess it's okay. But what's not okay then is using a semicolon to make that attachment because that second part is not its own sentence. It could not stand alone. There is no kind of like verb here. And so that gets rid of C and D. Now, the comma would be very strange here because it would be like the word however doesn't exist. And we can do this with the word however. We can kind of insert it anywhere we want in a sentence. So when we do that, it's an interruption. So let's just try reading this without it and see how it sounds. Only 5 of these dances are included in international ballroom dance. Rumba, samba, cha-cha-cha, paso doble, and jive, the last of which is grouped with the other Latin dances despite not having Latin roots. You might have heard, I needed to take a breath there. I needed to pause after competitions, right? Did I say the word competitions or I skip it? Whatever the case, I needed to pause there, right? So basically, what this means then is we need some sort of punctuation and the word, however, throwing in there with those 2 commas, it's not enough. We need something to connect this. And you might remember, this is probably a good example of where like if you learn something incorrectly, you might actually get this sentence correct. We associate colons with lists. So if you think about that in a way, that's kind of why A is right, is we have a sentence and we follow it with a list. But remember, colons don't need lists. What's really happening here is we have the normal kind of way of using a colon. We do need a sentence beforehand. We said before that checks off. Then afterwards, we could have a list. We could have anything, really. We could have another sentence if we wanted to. The point is, the second part is going to, in some way, kind of answer a question that is strongly suggested by the first part. So in this case, only 5 of these dances are included in international ballroom dance competitions. What are the 5 dances? Rumba, samba, cha-cha-cha, paso doble, and jive, right? It answers that question. So this is a perfect, use of the colon. But I can't say that I've ever in SAT writing or in just like normal newspapers and articles and things like that, I don't think I've ever seen a case where there's a colon and a dash in the same sentence. I guess it must have happened. Like, I just don't have any memory of it. But that's how weird that is. And that, I think, is going to scare people of like, that doesn't seem to work. But it's possible the dash is just used kind of like a comma, kind of like a colon to add on extra things, but it's a different punctuation mark. So it's not like we're doing 2 colons here. That's not what's happening. So it is strange, but I do think that this is why we need to really stick to the rules for the sentence structure with colons and semicolons, because then we're not bothered by strange sentences that we probably wouldn't write ourselves. We're just focused on like, well, is it a sentence? Is it not a sentence? And those things are kind of indisputable. And so sometimes you end up picking a random punctuation mark that you would never have used personally, but it fits the rules. And that's all we care about. Does it fit the rules?